Hey guys, time for the video review for Chapter 9. This one's short. It's only one page, so it won't take very long. First question is find the normal domain and range of that equation. We don't need to put this in the calculator. We don't need to look at the graph or anything. The domain has to do with this number right here. First of all, we can see that it is a negative, so the graph will look something like this. Okay. My domain is going to be from that value to infinity. In this case, that value is x minus 3 equals 0. We would solve that to be x equals 3, which means my domain will be from 3 to infinity. The range comes from this last value over here, which is plus 7. Now, because there's a negative 2 at the beginning, this is going to be a decreasing function, which means that my range is going to start at the bottom, negative infinity, and go up to positive 7. So it's going to be from negative infinity to 7 with a bracket on that side. Next question asks, is the function f of x equals 0.3 radical x plus 1 minus 4 increasing or decreasing on the normal domain? Might be not a bad idea to go ahead and plug that one in. So if I put in 0.3 radical x plus 1 with a minus 4 at the end, and I graph it. Super hard to see, but you can see that it's sort of creeping upwards, which means that it's increasing. The other way you can tell that is if this number, the value in the front, is positive, it's always going to be increasing. So this is an increasing function. The next one says, what is the maximum value of the function y equals negative 5 radical x minus 2 plus 4? Well, the maximum value is going to be, again, where the graph is at its highest point up here. And we're always looking for the x value for these. Again, super easy to find because with a square root function, this value gives you the opposite of the domain, and which means that whatever this x value is going to be your maximum. In this case, it's found by setting x minus 2 equal to 0, solving for x, which means that my value is going to be at 2. Number 4 asks us to find the 0. Now this one requires a calculator. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug this into the calculator. Negative 5 radical x minus 2 plus 4. And we're going to look at it. Now you can see there it's not at a pretty point. It's going down somewhere between positive 2 and positive 3. So I'm going to add a 0 in there and then find the intersection of the two lines and go to my graph here. Now if I go to second trace intersect, you'll notice the first one, we have a 0 here, but there's no y value. That's because the graph doesn't exist at x equals 0. So we need to scroll over until a y value appears. There you go. And you can see the little spider on there too. So we're going to look here at x equals, well, it looks like 0, and then press our enter 3 times. Enter, enter, enter. And my x value is 2.64. Now, as I've mentioned before, we would rather have that as a fraction. And the way you do that is you press x, math, enter, enter, and the fraction is 66 over 25. So xe, 66 over 25. Next one, in the function y equals all that stuff, describe all values of d that cause the function to be decreasing. Now we talked about that up here, in that the value that makes this into a decreasing function is the fact that it's a negative 5 in the front, which means that d would have to be a negative value. So d must be less than 0 for it to be a decreasing function. Any number less than 0 will work. Okay. Next one, find any square root function whose minimum value is 47. Two things going on here. First, minimum value. Okay, minimum value means that my graph is going to be moving up. Okay. The second thing is that the minimum value is 47. Now remember up here we talked about the maximum being 2 because that was the x value here. Here, the x value is going to have to be 47. So if x equals 47, that means in order to make it into a square root function with a minimum of 47, this is going to have to go inside the parentheses, which means that we flip the sign. So I'm just going to put a 2 there just to make sure it's positive. I'm going to say x minus 47, and then I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, this would have a minimum value at 47 because it's a positive function, which means that it's going to have a minimum. And the minus 47 on the inside means that the minimum value will be positive 47. All right, now on to the fun ones. Next we have simplify 5 over radical 5. Now remember, we can't have radicals in the denominator, so the way we fix that is we multiply by the same radical to rationalize it, which becomes 5 radical 5 over radical 25. Radical 25, square root of 25, is just 5. And then if you look at these two, 5 and 5 cancel here, which leaves me with an answer of just radical 5. So that's that. Next one, simplify radical 75. Now we talked about using patterns to do this, so we're going to look for what is 75 divisible by. Well, 2 doesn't work. 3 does though. 3 times 25. And then can we break up that 25? We sure can. 3 times 5 times 5. Now again, we talk about this is a square root, so it needs a group of 2 in order to be able to come outside. These two 5s inside become 1 5 on the outside. What's left over on the inside stays on the inside, so my simplified radical would be this value here. On to the next one, simplify and multiply. This is, we're just going to use double distribution. So radical 3 times radical 12 becomes radical 36. Radical 3 times 1 becomes radical 3. Negative 2 times radical 12 becomes minus 2 radical 12. And negative 2 times 1 becomes negative 2. Now, we can't simplify any of these the way they are. However, I do know that the square root of 36 is 6. Okay, I'm going to leave this radical 3 right here because 3 is a prime number, which means that I can't do anything with that. However, minus 2 radical 12, I can change that to 2 times 2 times 3. And then a minus 2 on the end. Now again, we have this group of 2 here on the inside, which we can simplify. 2 times 2 radical 3. Remember, 2 inside means 1 outside, and the minus 2 at the end. Now these two we're going to multiply together. Sorry, this is getting a little complicated here. 6 plus radical 3 minus 4 radical 3 minus 2. Then we're going to combine like terms. I have a 6 here and a minus 2 here, which gives me a positive 4. I have a plus radical 3 here and a minus 4 radical 3. So that's 1 minus 4 would be minus 3 radical 3. Okay, so that's the solution for that one. Next one is divide and simplify. Remember, we have to multiply by conjugates if we want to get this thing out of here. You can't just multiply by radical 2, you have to multiply by 1 minus radical 2 on both the top and the bottom. Now fortunately for us at the top, since there's just a 1, the top just becomes 1 minus radical 2. The bottom we have to use distribution, so 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times negative radical 2 is negative radical 2, radical 2 times 1 is plus radical 2, and then radical 2 times negative radical 2 is negative radical 4. Now as we talked about before, these middle terms here, negative radical 2 and positive radical 2, those cancel, okay, which leaves us with just 1 minus radical 4 on the bottom, and the square root of 4 is 2. Now 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So if we put all this back together, the 1 minus radical 2 on top stays the same. We have a negative 1 on the bottom. We don't want to leave a negative 1 on the bottom. If we're any other number, it'd be fine, but 1 means that it's just the same thing. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by negative 1, which means we'll have negative 1 plus radical 2. That will be my final answer because that negative 1 changes the signs here. And that's it. Told you it was short. Very short quiz. You guys should be able to do a really, really great job on it. And good luck tomorrow.